3 months ago I kitbashed Chaos Terminators out of the new Wolfguard ones. And today I'm going to make that squad whole, adding 2 more very unique models. The Pale Jackals are an ongoing series here on this channel, as I always wanted to have my very own and unique warband. And I am always looking for unique things to do to them. When the first video was released, I had a more or less open end to it. They had no name, no origin, and only the idea that they should appear chaotic without being subscribed to a specific god. And I asked for your ideas. And oh boy, you had so many good ones that I hope I could put at least some of the most requested ones into these 2 miniatures. The Ancient. Starting off with this frame. Up until this point everything is like in the instructions, so let's get rid of the loyalist symbols on his chest and knee. First I cut most of it off, then using the edge of my knife and scrape it as flat as possible. It will be covered up and destroyed even further in the end anyway, so I don't need to be that neat here. The idea is to give this one a huge banner. And I think a sword that is held up into the air in a very heroic stance. I used this old world Chaos Knight's arm, cut the ball joint flat so I could place it better and according to my taste, achieving that with a little green stuff. So while the green stuff hardens out, I tackle the main feature of the miniature, the banner. Once again, the Slaves to Darkness provided this one, as well as the banner top that comes from a Dark Oath kit. And after I got rid of all the mold lines, I needed a banner pole because I somehow lost the original one, but a Chaos Knight from the new kits didn't need his lance, so I cut it in some pieces, more or less being able to use the entire thing in one. I guess this is waste management. I cut away the little knob, and if you do such a thing, be very careful, as there is much stress and tension on the tip of your blade and it could easily break if you press too hard. I also cut away the original banner top, thinking that I could maybe use it in some other place. And instead of the original banner top, I used the guard of that lance. The Dark Oath icon fitted quite perfectly onto it, and once again a little bit of green stuff did the job here. It is quite a butchery build, but it won't be visible in the end, so I am okay with that. And after I arranged it, I waited for it to dry and used a little bit of super glue to connect it on some places. Since the Wolfguard Terminators come with a shield, I could use one arm of that and remove the handles with my clippers. Because it will have multiple anchor points in the end, I don't mind pinning this one. Cutting apart the lance into 2 totally not eyeballed rods and placing them where a banner pole is needed. The longer one on the top and the shorter one for the bottom. And of course the hand with the rest of the arm in between. And after that I waited for it to dry and placed the banner on top of that, again using green stuff. Waste management seems to be the theme here as well, so I used the blade of the tip of the lance and used it as a banner top for the top of the banner. I gave him a manicure so his hand could be a little closer and has a bigger surface to glue it onto the fabric. And again using some super glue here so it hardens a little faster and I don't have to hold it for half an hour. After that was done, I took care of his bare chest, thinking I'd just place some horns from a Orc brute here. It somehow fitted the aesthetic, making him look a little bit tribalistic and again matching the more occult looking theme of the Pale Jackals. Because the Terminator shoulder guard is not really designed for such extreme movements, I again used an old world Chaos Knights one where I stripped a little bit of the formwork so his arm fitted better underneath it. Again, if you should do such a thing, be very careful because the knives are not really meant to be used in such a way. As all the left pauldrons of the Terminators have the crux Terminators, I just used the right one and cut away a small bit for the front section to match the aesthetic. By the way, I'm currently working on a lore video for them, taking some ideas you guys had into account and also refining every word for this short narrative. And after that I finally placed the lower part of that banner pole, again anchoring it to the banner itself and the hand. As I butchered the right kneecap a little bit too much, I needed something to cover that up and used the Space Wolf's trinket for that. But the kneecap wasn't butchered enough, so I had to remove a little more material. Do you remember the original banner top? Because I used that one for the Terminator armor, making him look a little more chaotic. As well as the lower part of an Horus Heresy Eye of Horus that I just aimed downwards. For his helmet I thought I used a Night Lord Nemesis Claw one, as the stylized open mouth really gave this one much character even though he wears a helmet. And I don't know about you, but I can see a canine face in there as well, tying the whole pale jacket thing together. And he also got a Horus Heresy bolter bag from the weapons platform kit. And again some green stuff to cover up the backside of that not so delicate banner. I just rolled it as flat as I could, like cookie dough, and used my sculpting tool to match the surfaces of the banner poles. And after that I just glued some ornaments on it, as well as on the bottom of the banner pole. That is just the end of a Stormcast Eternal's hammer. Banner. The Obliterator. This one is going to be the blunt one. The hunched over brute. And while I remove the pesky loyalist symbols, I talk about the idea. Many of you commented something like a Obliterator infested gunsman or a gunslinger, and I was happy to pull this one off. If you know the older Obliterators, you might see a strong influence here. So the first and very important thing here is to give him a bear hat. This one here is from the Chaos Legionnaires, and as it gives me some strong Obliterator vibes, I think it is perfect for this one. And after the direction in where this one is looking was clear, I went on with his main feature, the left arm, which comes from an Orruk. The idea is to have this one be mutated, like, again he is infected with the Obliterator virus and he seemed to be the gunner of the group anyway. So we start with the bolter, nothing more Space Marine than a bolter, but I wanted it to make myself a little easier and flip that one around so I could use the magazine as a foundation to build even more weapons onto it. So I cut away the front side of that bolter, removed a little material onto the bottom part of it, flipped it 180 degrees and used another bolter's front side that I carefully placed onto the now new upper part of the bolter, so it looks like an undersling weapon. Which is very cool, say what you want. Now I had to be a little more precise and cut away a bit of material on that Orruk's arm to make the positioning even better. And once again a little bit of green stuff and we start to have a weapon here. I searched for some cool looking gun parts and found these Horus Heresy ones. I only had to remove the hands on them, not being particularly neat here, as most of that will be covered up anyway. And if not, it is only adding to the visuals and lore behind this one. Like, it's not very carefully formed because he's not really used to it by now. After that I glued it onto the magazine of the bolter and went on with the muzzle end of an autocannon that I glued beside it, making the entire thing look as asymmetrical as possible. But please still facing straight forward, it's not an auger gun. And after that I glued some whatever these are on the side of that arm to cover it up and make it even stranger. And gave him a rocket launcher. Why not? It's cool. And instead of using the intended one, I used the Horus Heresy Contemptors one, because in 40k, bigger is better. The only thing to do here is to cut away the little knobs on that Terminator's back and on the underside of that launcher itself. These are so small that I nearly oversaw them, like the mold lines on that Iron Warrior's plasma pistol from last week. So while I lay this one to sleep, I thought I strangify the mutated weapon even further. Placing some green stuff that I will paint as flashy bits in the end, only sculpting them a little with my sculpting tool. And after that I glued the autocannon as well as the mutated one to his shoulders. I chose to make him hold the mutated arm a little more protective and not quite ready for action yet, like he is still using his normal autocannon, so it looks like he is not quite ready to use his new features. As I could imagine that even an Astartes may need some training in using weapons that form out of your body. And after that I glued on his shoulder armor and his head. By the way, in Germany they were called Kyborgs back in the days, which I thought was the original name up until I did some research for this video. The more you know. And when that was done, I took the necklace of a Wilder Fiend, which is an incredible cool model in my opinion, and removed the part that would lay around his neck. Turned it 180 degrees and used it as an ornamented neck protection. Making him look like a even more armored, walking and occult looking tank human being kind of thing. Because strange weapons obviously need some strange power supplies, I placed some various cables on him. And one more cable. And after that I found the chainmail of a Death Guard, which fitted so incredibly well after cleaning it up, that I had to use it for his rear protection. And one more cable. And a dagger from the time where he maybe needed one. And as there is a little gap which looked a little strange, I thought I covered that up with some rockets from the Chaos Space Marine sprue. And after that I first drilled all of the holes of my, let's call it custom corruption, on both of them and destroyed the armor even further with a knife. And went on with something a little more chaotic. I wanted the not so strange looking weapon look even not so even stranger. So it got an arm of a chaos spawn, making the whole thing kinda look like a pincer claw. I think it adds even more to the idea of random things happening to this arm. And of course he also needs a spike. Why not? It's chaos. And after all that was dry, it was time to put on some Agrellan Badland that forms some crackles on that armor and go right into the painting. I, as always, started with neutral grey and wolf grey wet blended into each other. As always, trying to paint the brighter grey more towards the top of the miniature. Painting the banner white for now, and at this point I do not really have an idea what I will paint on it, so there is no reason to be neat here as well. Once these two colors were done, I went on with dark silver for all the weapons, armor joints, air vents and cables. After that it was time to paint all the trim and chaos looking bits like the runestones. And if you made it up until this point, I'd love to encourage you to leave a like and maybe a subscription, and if you like the content, maybe even use the new hype function. It really helps the channel growing and is the quickest way to let me know. And if you have some ideas on what to improve, please feel free to word them. And then I used a 50-50 mix of burnt red and dark rust to paint all the straps, leathers, bones, wolf pelts and wolf trinkets. Always trying to randomize the hues of the colors a little. When that was done, I painted all over the golden parts with Pro Acryls Jade to get the first step of the verdigris effect that makes the pale jackals stand out in the end. When that was done, I highlighted the armor with wolf grey and white, as always trying to have the brighter parts more towards the top. I don't care for edge highlighting at this point, as I'm going to weather it down anyway. Once that was done, it was time to lay down some shades. Vallejo's Game Wash Black and Sepia to be precise. Black for all the metallics and sepia for the places of the armor that would catch some dirt, like the deepest recesses and where it's damaged. When that was dry, I went on with the second coat of jade, but this time I used a little less paint as in the first time. And because I darkened it down in the step before, I get a very volumetric verdigris-like effect. And after that it was time to get some colors onto the dirt, again using dark rust and burnt red, but this time it's watered down a little more to form some smudgy wet patterns on top of that sepia. I like it when there's multiple hues for dirt, as it looks a little more interesting even though it's not that realistic. But who cares for realism? I as well paint this color mix onto the edges of the armor, making it appear a little bit chipped. For his face and mutated arm, I went with violet red this time, as it looks a little sicker than dark purple. I started wet blending Buckman's glow into it, tying him and the other Chaos Boys together. For that Pinsel Claw, I as well wet blended Elfic Flesh onto it to achieve a transition between that thick color that is very fast becoming a bone structure or a claw. After that I put on a little bit of light flash onto his face and the arm. And went on with the rest of the bones and necklace. To make them stand out, I used Parasite Brown to give them a different hue that is still within the color palette of these miniatures. And sorry for that back and forth, but painting is a process sometimes, and I figured painting some skin colors onto the weapon itself will make it look like it's growing out of his arm even more. And if one is using a thin layer of paint, one can see the metallic paint underneath it, which looks very cool if done moderately. And after that I used a 50-50 mix of Elfic Flesh and white to indicate a teeth-like structure one knows from lobsters and other sea life. And once that was done, it is time for the red accents that are mostly the cables, weapons and eyes of the miniatures. I first put on a base coat of gory red and layer it with a mix of gory red and a tiny amount of white. This can turn pink very fast, so I try to be very careful with that. And after that, it is time to roughly edge highlight the trim and metallics with bright silver and light bronze. And once that's done, I come to the most important thing for the first one, the banner itself. I decided to do something more simple this time, having a stylized jackal as a symbol that I could easily replicate on future minis, some green flames that play a role in their background lore, and a bit of a chaos star and symbols. For obvious reasons. So, what do you think? I think it's a shame that we as Chaos players don't have any Ancients or other banner-bearing miniatures in our range at this time. And please don't take this Disco Lord into it. And it's also a shame because maybe you know I'm a Slaves to Darkness player and that faction lives from that. But anyway, enough rant. I'm very happy how this squad turned out after 3 months and looking forward to other units. But this video was long enough, and if you made it through, thank you for your time, thank you for the engagement and the ideas, shaping these white chaos boys into existence, and I hope you were entertained and we are going to see each other in the next one.